Hawaii is known to be one of the most beautiful places in the world, with its vast beaches, beautiful scenery, and one of the world's largest active volcanoes. Even with all of its beauty, Hawaii has dark secrets that it tries to keep hidden from the world. This story is based on the true disappearance of John Cameron Reese. John disappeared during a hike on Thanksgiving Day in 1999. While the story is a fictional retelling of his disappearance in first person, is it possible that the story could be more truth than fiction? My name is John, a 22-year-old Texan who recently moved to Hawaii to work as a vegetation intern for the U.S. Geological Survey. The job was a dream come true, living on the slopes of Mauna Loa, exploring wild landscapes for work, and getting paid to hike the trails of one of the most beautiful places on Earth. This was the life I'd imagined, full of green mountains, misty valleys, and endless horizons. But with the holidays approaching, my homesickness had started to creep in. It was Thanksgiving week, my first one away from my family. The thought of sitting in my tiny apartment, scrolling through family photos of my parents and siblings gathering without me, felt like a slow torture. So I decided to escape that gnawing feeling and get lost in the wild for a few days. I would celebrate Thanksgiving my way, surrounded by the raw beauty of the island. The Pu'u'umi Natural Area Preserve was the perfect choice. I'd been there a few times for work, but I never had the chance to explore it on a serious hike. The preserve was filled with towering koa trees, emerald green cliffs, and a rugged coastline that reminded me of just how small I was compared to nature. I called my friend Frank, another intern, and convinced him to drop me off at the entrance. He was happy to do it. He was spending Thanksgiving on a nearby island with his girlfriend's family and was already on his way out. I'd packed everything I'd need, even rain gear, and by mid-morning, Frank's old Jeep rattled to a stop on the edge of the preserve. We exchanged a quick handshake, and I waved as he drove off, leaving me alone in the quiet wilderness. With a deep breath, I took in the smell of rain-soaked earth and ocean air, the calls of native birds and whispers of leaves in the wind. For the first day, everything was perfect. I hiked along the ridge where the view opened up to the ocean on one side and a thick green canopy on the other. The world felt endless, like I'd stepped into some primordial paradise where time itself had slowed down. As the day wore on, I noticed the weather shifting. The air grew cooler, and the low rumble of thunder echoed in the distance. I'd been warned about the storms that could suddenly sweep through these islands, unpredictable and intense. But the thrill of it made me feel alive, and I figured I'd set up camp here for the night, have a small fire, and ride it out if it hit. When the sky began to darken, I found a small flat area shielded by a rocky overhang and set up my hammock between two sturdy trees. I built a fire, more for comfort than warmth, and sat there, watching the flames dance as the stars began to peek through the clouds. The firelight flickered, casting shadows across the trees, and for a moment, I thought I saw movement, a figure standing just beyond the trees. But when I looked closer, it was gone. I shook it off, laughing at myself for letting my imagination run wild. That night, I drifted off to sleep with the sound of distant thunder as my lullaby. The next morning, I woke up with a soft glow of sunrise filtering through the trees. I ate a simple breakfast of jerky and trail mix, laughing at myself at my Thanksgiving feast. Then I packed up and continued down the trail, my heart light and my mind at ease. The storm clouds had cleared, leaving the sky a brilliant, endless blue. But as the day wore on, the sky began to shift again. Thick, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, moving in fast. I felt a familiar pang of unease as the first drops of rain fell, heavy and cold. I tightened the straps of my pack and pressed forward, hoping the trail would lead me to some kind of shelter. But after another hour of hiking, it was clear that this storm wasn't going to pass quickly. Just off the trail, I spotted a dense thicket of trees that might offer some cover. I pushed through, ducking under the branches, and stumbled upon a small, hidden pond. At the far end of the pond was a dark opening, a cave. Relief washed over me. This could be the perfect place to wait out the storm. As I moved toward the cave, I froze. A woman was crouched by the edge of the pond, her back to me. She was trailing her fingers through the water, the ripples spreading out in perfect circles. She looked out of place, especially out here in the middle of nowhere with no gear and no jacket. Her clothes were light, almost like a summer dress that clung to her skin from the damp air. I called out, asking her if she was alright, trying not to startle her. She didn't respond, just kept tracing patterns in the water. There was something hauntingly beautiful about her, an otherworldly quality that made her seem like she belonged to the landscape. I took a step closer. I asked her again if she was okay. She finally looked up, turning her head slowly. Her eyes met mine, and a shiver ran down my spine. She was beautiful, yes, but her face held an unsettling intensity, like she was staring right through me. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. There was a strange but gentle tone to her words. I told her I was just looking for some shelter for the storm. I pointed over at the cave. Her expression didn't change. She just shook her head slowly. "You shouldn't be here," she repeated, her gaze unwavering. Before I could respond, a flash of lightning split the sky, and the first roll of thunder crashed overhead, louder than any storm I'd ever heard. I glanced up at the sky, feeling the sting of rain on my skin. I knew it was time to get to shelter. I looked back down at the girl, but she was gone. I stood there, stunned. The forest around me was empty, and the only sounds was the pounding rain and the growing rumble of the storm. My heart raced. I wasn't sure what I'd just seen, but I didn't have time to question it. I needed to get out of the rain, and the cave was my best option. With one last look around, I hurried towards the cave, ducking inside just as the skies opened up. The cave was dark, the air was cool and damp with a faint, earthy smell. I set my pack down near the entrance and leaned against the wall, letting out a shaky breath. Outside, the rain poured down in sheets, thunder echoing off the walls. I looked back out of the cave. I wondered where that girl had gone. It was almost as if she was a ghost, the way she disappeared. I pushed the thought out of my head. If she was real, I just hoped she had made it safely out of the storm. I turned around, looking deeper into the cave. The cave stretched back into darkness. A narrow stream of water trickled from the pond outside, feeding into an underground pool. I stayed close to the entrance, not wanting to wander too far. But as I settled in, a faint sound drifted from deeper within the cave, like something shifting in the water. My pulse quickened. I grabbed my flashlight, the beam barely penetrating the thick darkness. I shined my light over the pool, but the light only revealed the rippling surface. I listened, holding my breath, but the sound was gone. Just as I was about to turn off the flashlight, the noise returned, louder this time. A wet, slithering sound, like something moving through the water. My mind raced, trying to think of what it could be. Maybe a large fish or an eel? But in a pool this deep in a cave? I took a cautious step forward, shining the light into the water. And that's when I saw it. Bubbles rising to the surface, and something dark just beneath the water. And then it moved. The water split. Something huge was just right below the surface. I stumbled back, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The creature's head broke the surface first, sleek and dark, with eyes that gleamed in the faint light. Panic flooded me. This wasn't a fish, and it wasn't anything I'd ever seen before. The creature's gaze locked onto me, its eyes filled with an intelligence that sent a chill down my spine. I stumbled backwards, nearly dropping my flashlight. My heart pounded, and every instinct screamed at me to run. I turned and bolted for the entrance. However, I was so frightened I didn't pay attention to my surroundings. I stepped on a large wet stone and fell headfirst into the water. Everything went black. The water was so deep I was fully submerged, and yet I still couldn't feel the bottom. I couldn't tell which way was up or down. It felt like I was lost in a pool of nothingness. Just as I was about to give up hope, my head broke the surface. I gasped for air, flailing my arms, desperately trying to grab for anything solid. I quickly pulled myself up, still breathing heavily. I rolled over to my back. As much as I wanted to lay here, I knew I needed to get out of this cave now, even if that meant I had to go back out into the storm. I stood up. I could see the light from the entrance of the cave. I was almost there. However, before I started moving again, I heard something that made me freeze. It was a voice. However, it wasn't just any voice. It was that girl's voice I had saw earlier. However, what had frightened me so much wasn't the fact I heard her voice, but it was what she said. "I told you, you shouldn't have come here, and now you must suffer the consequences." I looked behind me, but saw nothing. However, when I turned back towards the cave entrance, I saw it. It was the creature. It was a large, lizard-like creature. The closest thing I could compare it to would be a Komodo dragon, but it was not the same. It had to be at least 8 feet long, with large red scales down its back. It was just staring at me. Then, something one of the locals had told me flooded my mind. He told me about a local legend that had been around for centuries. It was about a creature that lived on the island with almost godlike powers, the Mo'o. They were ancient creatures, water spirits, guardians of the streams, caves, and ponds. Most tourists thought of them as myths or harmless folklore, but to many of the native Hawaiians, they were very real, powerful protectors of sacred places who took the form of giant lizards capable of shifting between human and reptilian shapes. The story warned that trespassing onto their territory uninvited brought grave consequences. Some Mo'o were benevolent, keeping the waters pure and safe for villagers, but others were known for their fierce tempers, especially if disturbed. I remember one story in particular. A Mo'o had trapped a trespasser in its lair, only letting him go after he offered gifts and pledged to never return. But those who failed to show respect never came back at all. They were claimed by the spirit world, their bodies never found, only whispers left behind to warn others. I just thought these were crazy tales told by the locals to scare kids, but here I was, looking this legend in the eyes. What had I gotten myself into? I knew there was no escape. I was frozen as I watched the Mo'o walk slowly towards me. It was there, in my final moments, when I realized that the legend of the Mo'o was real.